back. I'm gonna light these motherfuckers up.
What's going on, people? My name is Batman.
And today I want to talk about the things that Black Ops 3 got right and wrong. And this is something that every COD player needs to be talking about right now, because hopefully we can point out clearly enough the pros and cons of this game. Then Call of Duty 2016, which will most likely be CoD Ghosts 2, well then they'll hear about what we like and what we don't like and adjust their bullshit accordingly. Now I'm going to start with what this game got right, which is its core gameplay mechanics. Black Ops 3 is the sequel that Call of Duty should have had 3 years ago. It does retain some significant shortcomings. We are going to be talking about broken netcode and lag again this year. But as far as the in-game mechanics themselves, Black Ops gets a lot right that future Call of Duty titles would do well to emulate. The big existential challenge this franchise has faced the last couple of years is changing enough to justify the existence of a sequel without changing so much that it loses what makes COD special. Advanced Warfare incorporated significant changes via the exosuit, but this same mechanic sacrificed a lot of what made Call of Duty combat interesting. Things like laning, choke points, power points, flanking, and generally the use of cover and gunfights. Not that those things weren't present at all, but in a severely diminished quantity and watered down form. Black Ops 3 has succeeded in bringing fresh experiences to the formula without sacrificing any of the dynamics that made COD so addictive in the past. As a brief refresher, you'll recall I argued that AW's exosuit watered down the game because there was so much mobility that everyone could go in any direction at any time. And because of that, laning couldn't work because there was nothing keeping you in any particular lane. You never had to commit to going in this direction because you can change your mind at any time. Choke points didn't work because you can just go around them. This disrupted flow and map control became pointless. New maps are the primary source of variety and original content to a game like Call of Duty, right? All their DLC is just new maps, and we like playing on new maps. It keeps the game fresh. Why? It's not because the maps look differently, it's because they play differently. There's new combat scenarios and new kinds of gunfights and fresh choke points and rushing lanes and power positions. And AW's problem was that the exosuit made it much harder to provide those fresh gameplay experiences in their maps because the exosuit kind of blurred every map together. The gameplay wasn't changing all that much from map to map because the exosuit was so mobile that you could jump over and go around anything. Imagine you didn't have the exosuit and every map was just a flat empty parking lot, right? That would get boring fast. So they throw a bunch of objects and buildings into the parking lot, but because the exosuit makes you so much more mobile, it kind of defeats the purpose of the objects and buildings because it still plays kind of like a flat parking lot where anyone can go anywhere, anytime, and you can always get shot from any direction. There was no real structure to the ship because of their exosuit. So the beauty of Black Ops 3 is that its exosuit, with a more subdued jetpack than AW's and the addition of wall running, allows the multiplayer to retain all of those things I just mentioned, laning, choke points, power points, other intricacies of fun map design, while adding its own unique experiences in the form of very new, enjoyable flanks and rushing routes and new gunfighting tactics. And ultimately it changes enough from past CODs to justify its own existence, which is something that COD has failed to do for some time now. So we'll talk about these new experiences it provides in the context of Nuketown because we all know it pretty well and it's the clearest example of how the game can make significant gameplay additions and build on the old formula without taking away from it. When I'm playing Nuketown, it's got that fun, fast-paced simplicity and flank-friendly laning that has made it such a fan favorite in the past. But there's also a wide array of new tactics I can employ. When I'm coming from the backyard through one of the alleys on either side of those houses, I can sort of ricochet jump, bounce back and forth to gain some height, and then wall run to the end and then get a good jump with a jetpack thrust. I can end up landing right in the middle of the map. Now in that brief moment, I can get a bird's eye view of the whole map so I have an idea of what's going on, how many enemies or what paths are safe to rush on, and even better, it's a great counter if somebody is camping that car or the B flag boxes on the other side. You can come off that jump from the alleyway. It throws them off because they can't have eyes on the ground level and the sky level at the same time, so you start shooting them in midair, and it's a nice little counter as opposed to just walking out of the alleyway and getting mowed down by him as if it's D-Day, you know what I mean? It opens up a new tactic that wasn't available in past Nuketowns, but it still keeps all the fun of past Nuketowns. When somebody's camping in the window, you can just jump up there and fight them. It opens up great counter tactics, vertical flanks to every power position on the map, and new rushing lanes. What I like to do when you have fixed spawns in Nuketown, safeguard or demolition, or what have you, I like to get into the enemy's house on their side of the map and try and fuck shit up from in there and hang out the window and get them in the back as they're pushing forward, make sure that none of their guys can use their window. But usually it's tricky, for one, because it's really hard to get into that house in the first place, but they've placed walls up, convenient places like along the side of the map where B flag is, and instead of having to fight tooth and nail across the map in a sustained push that usually takes at least 30 seconds, you can now just wall run across the side of the map, and if you time it correctly, and it does take some practice and skill, you can land on that wall from your alley and then from that wall, land right on the front of their fucking house and wall run into the goddamn window, without ever having to touch the ground in the middle of the map at all. Now, is that method guaranteed success? No. It's still possible they see you and shoot you down, but in my experience, it has a much higher rate of success than a ground push because you're exposed for a shorter amount of time, and you are kind of less exposed because not everybody's looking in the air because they have to look on the ground to, make sure they aren't getting shot from the ground. And you get there so much more quickly. You get there in like 10 seconds as opposed to the 30 that it takes to push across the map, right? You just wall run across the side of the map and you're instantly in their house. And it's fun. The whole wall running experience itself is fun, and it's fun when you pull it off. It's very satisfying. You feel like a fucking badass Spider-Man motherfucker. And then once you're in the house, fucking shit up, and you're kind of stuck in one spot, because if you leave, they'll fuck you up. But now with the mobility, what I do is I go outside the window, and I wall run on the front of the house, and if there are guys in the front yard, they're not going to notice me, because I'm up above and behind them. So I'm on the front of the house, and I'm wall running on the front of the house, and I sneak wall run off to the side into their alleyway, and then I pop out of the alleyway, and I start blasting motherfuckers in their spawn from that side. So now they think I'm in the alleyway, so they come in there, but guess what? Now I can just wall run right back into their window, and I'm climbing in their window, snatching their people, and they have no idea where I am, and I'm using the mobility to keep moving around the map so quickly that the enemy can't close in around me. Nailing me is like trying to nail jelly to a wall, and when I first started using that strategy, I was like, this mobility stuff is subtle, but it really does open up some fun maneuvers. And that's true on every map. You'll find clever little rushing routes, vertical flanks. And if you're creative, you can find ways to string them together, and you start learning how to move around the maps as quickly and as stealthily as possible, Every map has cool wall running shortcuts, and if you can chain the walls together correctly, you can get from one side of the map to the opposite side of the map in a very, very short period of time. And most importantly, the mobility allows you to counter power positions. Like I was just talking about in the context of Nuketown, if somebody's head glitching some piece of cover or whatever, you can jump and come down on top of them and kind of throw off their aim, or if somebody's got some high up position, you can just jetpack right in there, and these counters aren't going to be successful all the time, but much higher rates of success than just running at the power position or trying to work around the whole map to get there, only to take a trip mine in the fucking face or what have you. And here's what I love about that. Because the mobility serves as a consistent counter to any power position or any piece of cover, it seems like they've actually been able to bring the quality of cover and power positions back to the series' roots, like what we would see in COD 4 World at War. What I complained about in most recent Call of Duties is that a lot of the cover was very polygonic and symmetric. Think back to a map like Solar in Advanced Warfare. Every piece of cover was a very simple shape, with very straight linear edges and corners. Neither side of any piece of cover provided a distinct advantage over the other side of that cover, right? It was about who got to the cover first. It was more of a game of hide and seek than it was, managing cover and using your aiming abilities to win gunfights. It was about who saw who first, and that's basically how I felt about Black Ops 2 as well. They simplified the cover to the point that it wasn't playing a major role in gunfights, and that sort of waters down the overall variety of the kind of gunfights you're getting into, right? Now, Ghost actually didn't have the same watered down pieces of cover, but it had other skill gap compression mechanics that did not mix well and ultimately ruined the whole game, but we're not even going to go there. In Black Ops 3, for the first time in a long time in Call of Duty, I feel like cover is playing a huge role in a lot of my gunfights. There's a lot of rough, uneven cover like tree stumps and shrubberies and crumbling walls and boulders. And I'm assessing how much of my body can I hide behind this piece of cover while retaining an adequate line of sight on this choke point or that objective or where I think this guy's going to be. And now the result of all these things, landing choke points, flanking, mobile gunfighting tactics, is a wider skill gap than we've seen in COD for a long, long time. And part of the reason I think they felt comfortable widening that skill gap is the specialist abilities, which are supers from Destiny, and that's another game where I felt like the skill gap in multiplayer was a little wider than usual for major FPS titles these days. I suspected that was because of the same reason I think it's wider in Black Ops 3 as well. Because supers can level the playing field enough and guarantee newer, weaker players some free kills each match, they don't have to try and provide those free kills through other more frustrating ways like map design, which is what I argued, Ghosts in Advanced Warfare and Hardline tried to do, right? Design the game with such low recoil and times to kill and so little meaningful cover that all that matters in a gunfight most of the time is who saw who first. And then they designed the maps with such chaotic random landing and flow like Ghosts, or include AW-style exosuits, that it becomes impossible to predict what direction the enemy is, and then it becomes completely random who sees who first, and everyone is guaranteed free kills. Skill is removed from the game, and equilibrium is forcibly achieved, and the result is a shitty game that nobody likes. Now, with a game like Black Ops 3, you can much more consistently predict enemy movements. There is laning in power positions. It is possible to check your corners and sustain map control and define your engagements. There is cover you can use strategically. And so seeing the bad guy before they see you is still an important factor, but it's not the only factor for determining who wins the gunfight like it has been in the past 2 CODs, and that's important. Whoever came up with the supers idea in Destiny, I think, deserves a blowjob, because Black Ops 3 copied it, and it allows them to move past what has been their single greatest obstacle for the last couple years, which is how do you make sure everyone is having fun all the time? Because it's no big secret that when you're doing poorly in a match, you're having less fun. If you do too poorly in too many matches in a row, eventually you stop playing the game. So I'd imagine they have this shit broken down to a science for maximum play times and sales. We need to make sure every player is at least getting, on average, this many kills per match. So they have to find ways to aid weaker players against stronger players. And really, this is what has been at the root of everything anyone has hated about CoD since its inception. In the past, it's been Juggernaut, noob tubes, or second chance, death streaks in general. But everyone got super pissed off about that shit, so they had to find some other way to do it. I would argue that's when they tried altering map design in Ghosts and AW. But then everyone hated those games in general, and now they have finally found a solution that, as far as I can tell, isn't really pissing anyone off that bad, which is Specialists. And you'll notice a lot of the Specialist abilities are actually mechanics that have been used to narrow the skill gap in the past. You got a modified form of second chance, you got Juggernaut, you have a super noob tube. The Specialists provide free kills with offensive things like the scythe or flamethrower or gravity spikes, or things like psychosis, active camo, and vision pulse help break spawn traps or blunt the enemy team's momentum in general, so a match doesn't snowball out of control to the point where one team is just humiliating the other one and taking a pee on them in some fucked up spawn trap. Because you know what I'm talking about. Even when it's not a spawn trap, those matches where one team oftentimes, full party, just runs away with the momentum, right? From the beginning, and they have a constant stream of UAVs and haters and lethal kill streaks, and they build more kill streaks off of those kill streaks, and they just spend the whole match basically beating up on the other team. You know what I mean. And those kind of matches were all too common back on COD 4 and MW2 and even Black Ops 1. And they just became unwinnable. And more often than not, those were the matches you'd always join in progress because so many people were leaving them, and those are the kinds of matches where if you're on the wrong end of too many of them, you will stop playing the game. And that's why things like death streaks were originally introduced as a mechanic to kind of blunt the enemy team's momentum when things started getting out of control. But again, everyone hated that shit so passionately that they had to take it out after MW3. And then the next year with Black Ops 2 is the first time we see skill-based matchmaking because they had to do something to try and decrease the frequency of those snowball out of control kind of matches, and they weren't able to use death streaks anymore. So again, I would argue that everything we have hated about COD in the last decade is the result of developers trying to protect the casual masses from full parties and such, and after all this time they finally found something that accomplishes that protection and levels the playing field to a degree by providing free kills and guaranteed opportunities to interrupt an enemy's string of kill streaks or get that one guy out of that one power position to regain some level of map control and ensure the enemy team's momentum does not reach a point where there's nothing you can do but get killed and the match has become unwinnable. And it accomplished those things perhaps even more effectively than death streaks and noob tubes, and it does so without pissing everyone off, because I'm not saying that everyone likes the Specialists, but they have not received a fraction of the kind of backlash that skill gap compression mechanics have received in the past. And that's because unlike something like death streaks, Specialists are a mechanic that actually adds something more to the game outside of their skill gap compression benefits, and they are something that everyone can use and have fun with. And they are fun. Each Specialist adds a fun little twist to your gameplay experience. I think it's a meaningful innovation that this franchise has needed for a while. It adds replay value. Each ability can be utilized in meaningful, creative ways. You can use them to apply new tactics to different game modes, whether it's super speed helping you cap in CTF, or reactive armor keeping you safe while you cap the B flag, or vision pulse letting you know what corners the bad guys are camping in the hard point, or active camo letting you stealthily camp choke points and search and destroy, or what have you. There's this huge influx of new and unique gameplay strategies and experiences and sandbox tactics that this game has desperately needed for a while. The one thing I'd like to see them do a little bit better in the future is teamwork-based abilities. That's the final critical missing element of COD, is there's still not really ever much reason to communicate or strategize with your team beyond, hey, there's a bad guy over there, go get him. And one last feature I'd give Treyarch props for is the water combat. That shit is sick as fuck, but they don't take advantage of it nearly enough. For the most part, the underwater aspect of this game is limited to clever hiding spots or clever sneaky flanking routes at various spots and various maps. And granted, those are fun to take advantage of, but the underwater mechanic is at its best when you're having full-on multiple-man firefights under there at once. And there's only one instance where that actually happens consistently, and that's on Hardpoint Aquarium. When the Hardpoint moves into the pool, and both teams dive in there, and you have a really interesting gunfighting experience down there, where you both have fairly unique combat movement, where they can move in all directions at any time. You have people doing the zero-G dance, dodging each other's bullets and looking for hiding spots. Some people are hiding underwater, and you're hiding behind dead bodies, and people are spraying into the water, and what they need is like some floating pieces of debris down there that serve as pieces of cover that move around when you touch them. That would be intense. And they also need some piranhas and some killer fish down there that you have to avoid. And what would be incredible is if you dived into the pool and they had a bunch of fish in there, and when you moved closer to the fish, they got out of the way. That would be insane. But, you know, in general, I wish they would put a B flag underwater. That would be freaking intense. Or, like, have the uplink score thing in the water so you play freaking water polo, and it doesn't even have to be water. They could have the same zero-G mechanic up in a space station, which would be pretty cool aesthetically. Or you have, like, a pool of water in a space station on the moon. Holy shit! Double zero gravity. What is 0 times 0? What happens when you put more zero gravity in zero gravity? Do you get negative gravity? All in all, Black Ops 3 did a lot right that future COD games need to emulate. My fear is that they'll regress backwards and fail to implement the same level of innovation we've seen in this game. And yet at the same time, I'm worried they'll fail to fix the same shit Black Ops 3 failed to fix, which is a crippling netcode problem that erodes the consistency of every match and every gunfight. And that's something I'll certainly be making another video about because it's a goddamn tragedy. This game is like a really great skate park, okay? It's a fun-ass skate park. It's really big. It's got everything you could ever want in a skate park, alright? Half pipes, full pipes, pot pipes. But if you have a broken ankle, no matter how well designed the skate park is, you're not going to have fun because you can't skate on a broken ankle. The netcode in Black Ops 3 breaks every player's ankles right from the get-go. And so long as that broken netcode persists, even the greatest COD of all time will still only ever be a broken mess. The For the One query of the day is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being dog shit, 10 being super awesome. What do you score Black Ops 3 and why? Thanks for watching. Please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.